It was supposed to be a quick drive, a shortcut, really through a long stretch of highway no one paid much attention to. The road seemed like any other. Asphalt worn down from years of use, trees lining both sides, their skeletal branches twisting above in the dimming evening light. Mia, a young woman in her late 20s, drove with her hands tightly gripping the wheel. Her companion, Ethan, was sitting beside her, lost in his own thoughts. The low hum of the tires against the road was the only sound inside the car. "We should have taken the main highway," Ethan said, breaking the silence. Mia glanced over, her grip tightening. "It's faster this way. Besides, we've been on the road for hours already." "Yeah, but it's too quiet," he murmured, looking out at the endless expanse of the road ahead. "A bit too quiet." The words hung in the air as they both stared out the windshield at the empty road stretching ahead. The dimming sunlight made it difficult to see anything clearly. And still there was nothing. No other cars. No movement in the trees. It was as though they were the only two people left in the world. Hours passed, and the sun finally dipped behind the horizon. Mia was starting to feel uneasy. She had heard about this stretch of highway before, rumors of a serial killer who roamed it, picking off travelers one by one. But she didn't believe in rumors. She had to focus on getting to the next town. Ethan was getting more restless. He kept checking the rearview mirror, shifting nervously in his seat. "Mia, do you see that?" he asked, his voice unsteady. She glanced at the mirror, but saw nothing behind them. Just darkness, stretching endlessly. "There's nothing back there," she said. But Ethan wouldn't let it go. "I swear I saw someone. We're being followed." Mia's breath caught in her throat. She laughed nervously, though it didn't reach her eyes. "You're imagining things. No one's out here." The tension between them thickened, and as she drove further down the highway, a creeping unease settled in her chest. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The trees on either side of the road seemed to loom closer, their shadows growing long and monstrous in the headlights. The radio was silent, the static filling the empty spaces of their conversation. Mia turned the dial, desperate for any kind of distraction, but only more static. She could feel Ethan's eyes on her, and she caught him glancing at the rearview mirror again. His knuckles were white as he gripped the door handle. "You're still worried about that guy, aren't you?" she asked, forcing a smile to hide the knot in her stomach. "I'm not imagining it," Ethan said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "There's something behind us. I can feel it." Mia glanced at the mirror again, but this time she noticed something. The road behind them appeared different. The shadows in the trees seemed to shift, almost as if they were moving. The shapes seemed too deliberate, too fast. She couldn't be sure, but it was enough to make her pulse quicken. "There's nothing there, Ethan," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. She was starting to believe him. Suddenly, the car's headlights flickered, casting a brief, jagged light across the road. The figures in the trees, there were more of them now, moving in the distance. Ethan swallowed, gripping his seat. "We should pull over. Check it out." Mia, her pulse racing, shook her head. "We're almost out of here. Just a few more miles." The tension inside the car became unbearable. As the miles dragged on, Mia couldn't stop herself from glancing nervously into the rearview mirror, watching the shadows grow darker and more pronounced. She was sure she saw movement. Then came the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching on the gravel road behind them. Slowly, Mia's heart began to race. The footsteps were getting closer. They were no longer behind them. They were coming from the car itself. "Mia," Ethan whispered, fear creeping into his voice. "Someone's walking next to us." The footsteps grew louder, the thumping rhythm of boots on gravel blending with the erratic thud of Mia's heart. She could feel the cold air inside the car growing heavier, the silence outside more oppressive. She glanced at Ethan, but he was staring ahead, his eyes wide with terror. Suddenly, a shadow passed over the car, flicking across the windshield. Mia slammed on the brakes, her heart leaping into her throat as she skidded to a stop. She blinked, trying to clear her vision, but the shadow was gone. Ethan was breathing heavily, his hands trembling. What the hell was that? There was no answer. The silence returned, but it felt different now, darker, oppressive. "I'm getting out," Ethan said, his voice cracking. "No," Mia snapped, grabbing his arm. "You can't go out there. We'll be stuck. We'll be trapped." But Ethan wasn't listening. His fear had taken over, his mind unraveling faster than Mia could keep up with. He threw open the door and stumbled into the night. Mia watched in horror as Ethan disappeared into the darkness. She could hear his voice calling out faintly, but it was already fading, swallowed by the void around them. Panic surged through her chest. She wanted to scream, to chase after him, but her body was frozen in place, gripped by an overwhelming fear. She turned the key in the ignition, but the engine sputtered. The car wouldn't start. In the distance, she could hear a faint whisper, someone calling her name. It sounded like Ethan, but it didn't quite sound like him. It was distorted, warped by the night air, as if it came from someone else. A figure moved closer, too close to be real, creeping up next to her window, illuminated only by the pale light from the dying headlights. The air was thick with the scent of decay. She slammed the car door, her heart pounding in her ears. Was it real? Was this happening? The whispers continued, and Mia realized, with dawning horror, that the true terror of the highway wasn't the killer following them. It was the fear itself, growing inside her, feeding on every second of her paranoia. Mia couldn't tell where the road ended and where the darkness began. Every turn she took led her deeper into the void, the fog clinging to the car like a suffocating blanket. Ethan was gone, swallowed by the road. His last cry echoed in her mind, over and over again, as the highway continued its endless, twisting path. She couldn't trust the road anymore, couldn't trust her own mind. The road didn't just take travelers, it broke them. And Mia was next. If you like this story, and for more dark stories, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. See ya!